Hey, everybody, and welcome to our latest Skewed and Reviewed Skewedcast. I'm Gareth at Skewed and Reviewed. Check us out online at sknr.net. You can also catch me each week at penalcentral.com, which is the 8 newspapers in the greater Phoenix area. And just look up keyword skewed. You can see our articles and reviewed there. Each week I do a segment on KISW-FM's BJ Shea's Geek Nation. And you can also see the simulcast on our page or go to ksw.com. And finally, we have our quarterly magazine. We're working on the next issue. So lots of stuff. We cover all things pop culture, film, game, travel, conventions, hardware, and more. And join me, as always, are Justin and Michael. And we have a lot of interesting stuff to talk to you about today. But we also have two special guests. So Jeremy and Mark, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves, and we'll kick right into the topics as soon as you're ready.
Sure. So my name is Jeremy Kaplowitz.
Oh, I'm Mark Roebuck.
Yeah, we're two editors for The Hard Times, which is a comedy punk rock satire website. But we specifically run the nerd culture section of it, which is called Hard Drive.
We also recently launched a podcast, which we co-host, which is called the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. A show all about the beloved, to us at least, 1989 Lou Albano, Danny Wells, Super Mario Bros. Saturday morning cartoon / live action hybrid.
Yeah.
Oh man, back in the good old days when we actually got cartoons on Saturday morning.
Yeah, and it's really been fun diving back into this stuff. And as much as I just like the Mario show, it really just has that vibe of the great, Saturday, the 80s and 90s Saturday morning cartoon. And it's bonkers and it's funny and it's surprising. There's so many amazing, because it's actually the best of both worlds, because the show starts with a live action segment. And so in that, you get a lot of great cameos. So far, we've seen Sergeant Slaughter. We've seen Ernie Hudson. We've seen a lot of, we saw pre-Wonder Years Danica McKellar just playing an orphan that showed up at Mario and Luigi's door. And then, then they do a cliffhanger. They throw to a really just fun, episodic cartoon adventure, and then back to the live action thing to, settle whatever they set up before. It's a riot. It's so much fun.
I think that stuff's really coming back into style. Not that it ever went away, but it's really coming to the forefront, because I saw something recently about MTV's bringing back Celebrity Deathmatch. And I'm very curious to see who they're going to get in. And I mean, of course, you're not going to have Cyndi Lauper and Madonna. You're probably going to get Ariana Grande, taking on
Cardi B or something.
Cardi B or someone like that. Yeah. But at least it'll be interesting to see, especially. And it's funny because I keep thinking back to what Mike Judge said about when he brought Beavis and Butthead back. It had outstanding ratings, but MTV wouldn't renew it because he flat out refused to stop taking shots at their shows, like Jersey Shore, 16 and Pregnant, and all of that. And that's what he, he stopped the music videos. That's what he was ripping on in the cutscenes.
That was so fun to see them watch programming, because especially too, it's a commentary on just like, I know it's such like almost a hacky thing, like, MTV doesn't play music videos anymore, but it's true. So it makes sense that like this is what Beavis and Butthead is sitting around watching these days, and of course they wouldn't like it.
Oh no, I mean, it just always thought that was the classic. So we got some news in the world of Alien. So Justin, why don't you tell us about what's going on, and then we'll go around and get commentary from everyone, because it looks like something we all thought was dead might indeed be revived, and it's got a very strong champion behind it. So take it away, Justin.
Yeah, so this is the ongoing saga of Alien 5. So just to recap everything that's come up so far, Neil Blomkamp a while ago tweeted some pictures of some concept art for an Alien 5 that he wanted to do, and this was kind of just a fun project for him. But it ended up garnering a lot of attention on social media and got Fox's attention, so they put him in charge of an official Alien 5 project. And this was to be a sequel to Aliens, directly ignoring the sequels of Alien 3 and Resurrection. Eventually, though, Ridley Scott kind of squashed that kind of project and went with the Alien Covenant angle with an idea of making two more sequels to Alien Covenant to bring this up into like a full prequel series up to Alien. So for a while we thought that Alien 5 was dead, and with Disney taking over, the future of the Alien franchise is kind of up in the air. It really could go either way now. so this weekend, IGN posted an interview with James Cameron about the upcoming Alita Battle Angel movie that he is a producer on. And to conclude out the interview, they asked him about Neil Blomkamp's Alien 5, and they asked him, can you give Neil Blomkamp a call about Alien 5? And he responded, "I'm working on that." So from my perspective, I'm not 100% sure this is an actual any sort of official announcement that James Cameron is involved in any way, but it's good to hope. And with Halloween ignoring its sequels and its all the sequels in that franchise, and the upcoming Terminator movie also doing the same thing, I think it is definitely possible that we could see this Alien 5 project be revived. And, if James Cameron's involved, then I'm on board.
Okay, and Michael, I'll get to you in 1 second. So, Mark, Jeremy, what is your take on this? What do you think we need this, or do we need an Alien Covenant conclusion before we go over to this?
I'm all for I like this trend that's showing up of these franchises that I love. If we can just keep going back to where James Cameron left them in the 80s, I like that trend a lot. If we can start ignoring some of the lesser received Alien and Terminator sequels. So conceptually, I'm very okay with that, and I'm certainly Neil Blomkamp seems like a very interesting person. I'd be curious to see their take. So, yeah, I would be very excited about that. Alien and Aliens, as well as Terminator and Terminator 2, are just like some of my absolute favorite movies, and I think there's stuff to like maybe in all of the sequels. I've never seen the director's cut of Alien 3 that people say is pretty good, but just by and large, I just felt like they both have sort of been, maybe they plateaued or they're sputtering out a little bit. So like I said, if we can just kind of take a few steps back and pick up where they were last at their absolute heights, I am 100% excited for that notion.
Perfect. Mark, do you have a take on this?
You've confused us. That was Mark, and I'm Jeremy.
I'm sorry, Jeremy.
No,
sorry.
You're good. I don't have my camera on either, so I'm making it even more complicated. But no, I think I'm on the same page where I'm like, I haven't seen. I don't think I saw the last Alien movie. I think the last one I saw was Prometheus, which is like, I feel like it was so obsessed with like kind of trying to explain all of the different histories of Alien, and I really don't think that people cared that much about it. I feel like the best way to keep going with these movies is to sort of just make movies in that world and like not really worry about the lore and all that stuff, as long as they just like kind of capture the feeling of the original ones. I think that's a good way to do it.
Yep. And Michael, your take on this to close this topic out?
Yeah, so I'm in agreement with pretty much everybody, and I agree that Prometheus, Covenant were okay movies. It did kind of go back and cover more the introduction of the aliens themselves and kind of tried to describe where they came from and how they were introduced. It was okay, but if I were to be honest, I would rather have seen something that was more in line with Alien or Aliens movie. Even Alien 3 I was okay with. If we could forget Resurrection ever existed, I'd be even better with that. So yeah, I think if James Cameron's involved, and I think if we can see some sort of sequel that ignores everything after 2, or even if they mention 3 a little bit, I'm okay with that. And just kind of focus on what made the Alien franchise good in the beginning, right? The stealthy aliens or the Space Marines getting involved and kicking butt. I'm good with all that. I don't really need another intro to how the aliens came about. I would be okay if we kind of left Covenant where we left it and not have a sequel to it and just kind of follow up on the Aliens franchise itself. So yeah, I think if James Cameron is on board, I think we're in a better place than we were for the previous movies anyways.
Can I ask you guys a question if anyone knows offhand? Because I've not seen
Sure.
Resurrection since it was in the theater in 97 or 98. So
Yeah, you haven't missed anything since then.
Is that a clone of Ripley in that one, or does Ripley
Yes.
die? Or like, where did
Yeah.
we leave Ripley is what I'm asking.
They clone her, what was it, like 200 years later in an
Yeah,
effort
'cause
to
she
try
was
to...
killed in 3, right?
Right.
And then cloned in Resurrection.
Right. It's like they tried to clone her multiple times to try to get the queen embryo that she was infected with.
And she's like cranky, right? It's like a cranky clone, is what I recall in Resurrection.
She's like a hybrid. She's like a hybrid human with alien tendencies. Like her blood is acidic. She's a little stronger. She's kind of yeah. And the silly thing about that too is Whedon actually wrote the script they based it on, and then they decided to kind of not do things like his original conclusion went out the door. There was a segment I remember in the screenplay where you find out that there is an illegal drug garden in the hydroponics bay of the big ship, and that's where they were financing all these covert operations through. And apparently, while they were trying to get to the ship, they went through it. And there was going to be this very big battle scene, and you find out the aliens kind of have a chameleon-like tendency where they could blend in and look like trees in the foliage and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And apparently, like the script talked about, you see a tree, you see a tree, you see a tree, and all of a sudden the tongue comes out from the tree, and they cut that whole scene for budget. I'm like, oh, come on, man.
Really cool.
So, but yeah, it's so funny because this movie will not die because Sigourney Weaver and Cameron in the past have talked up how much they like the story outline. They were even talking about it up at San Diego Comic-Con a few years ago, saying it's brilliant. And then, even in the last part of 2018, Blomkamp told people on social media it's dead. It's pretty much dead. It's not going to happen. And then last week, Disney comes out during one of their investor calls and says pretty much, we have no problem continuing Deadpool as an R-rated franchise. We have no problem with these R-rated franchises we're getting from Fox. And then all of a sudden, shortly thereafter, while Cameron is now working away on 4 Avatar movies that are Fox movies that are going to be working with Disney. He's got that relationship with them due to the Avatar land out in Florida at the Wild Animal Kingdom. Now all of a sudden we start hearing rumors that, he might be, hey, I'm behind this. And, and there's part of me thinking, if they filmed it with that camera rig that he used for Avatar and we get a true, not this shot in regular converted, if we get a true state-of-the-art 3D Alien, that could be at least something to watch out for.
So Neil Blomkamp is going to direct it? That's the idea?
Blomkamp would direct, Cameron would produce based on Blomkamp's out.
What has Blomkamp been up to? Because I feel like I don't really know that much about him, but I remember seeing District 9 and that was great, and then Elysium was like it was like fine, and I didn't see Chappie, but I feel like it got like okay reviews. Has he done anything recently that's been like a bigger hit or?
Not really. When Chappie didn't go over well at the box office, he started doing these. They're like short science fiction things, like 10-15 minute sci-fi movies. He's been working on that, and then there were some rumors that he had some other projects, and then lo and behold, this started to gain momentum again. So we'll see. I don't like to be the pessimist, but I'm kind of at that point where I'm the one where when the cameras roll, I'll believe it.
Oh yeah.
When
something like this that's been discussed and it keeps changing and everything. I would love it if it's not Alien or something. I've wondered about what is going to be like the huge, like the first really, really giant surprise release. The way they just, certain movies are now starting to have that thing. Like, when are they just going to be like, hey, guess what? Alien 5 comes out next month. I would love for something like that.
Pull like a Beyonce lemonade.
Yeah, I want the lemon. I want the lemonade of sci-fi.
Guess what? It's like in theaters.
Like Apex Legends. We heard about it Saturday night, and it came out Monday. It's like, oh, geez, okay.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great point because you are seeing it across all kinds of mediums and everything too. So that's what I want is like the first huge budget multi. Yeah. I don't know how you could do that and distribute it into thousands.
It would be hard now with social media because look at the Star Wars films. They go nuts trying to keep security on that, and we're still getting. I just saw a whole selection of what someone's claiming to be a concept art from the film for costumes and aliens and stuff like that. So even that stuff leaks out. But it's funny because we talk about these films. I remember the Logan's Run remake. Now, how many times has this thing been? It's gone through like at least 4 different directors. It's coming. It's to the point where I even talked to the author, William Nolan, online, and he was like, hell, I don't even know what's going on. He's like, I'm in my 90s now, and they're still talking. But I remember when we had our office out of Seattle, going up and speaking at a convention right outside of Vancouver. And, I'm sure most of they film a ton of stuff in the greater Vancouver area. And they were flat out saying, oh, you see that studio down the way? They start filming the Logan's Run movie with Bryan Singer in 3 weeks. And we're like, oh, cool. And it goes to show you, I mean, they literally apparently have the studio. They were all, and there you go. So, like I said. So, Something that is coming along. Michael and I played this last June at E3, if you can believe it, and now it's getting closer to its March release. But the private beta for The Division 2 released over the weekend. It's going on through today. And for those that don't remember, The Division is also supposedly getting a film treatment. Jake Gyllenhaal is attached to it. But, whether or not he gets the Batman role might affect when we see this. But anyway, it's about a pandemic that is released during the holiday season in New York City. And complete chaos, lots of people dead, roving gangs taking over, various factions fighting for power. And you're a government agent for a group called The Division that has to go in, patrol the streets, research the virus, take out the bad guys, save the innocent, and restore order. It was a pretty big hit, open world, a lot of recognizable locations. Well, now Ubisoft is back for the sequel, which is set in Washington, D.C., where you play a different agent a little later in the aftermath of the pandemic. Many famous locations are in the game. And so why don't we swing around? Michael, what was your impression about the demo compared to where we were when we first played it last June?
Yeah, so, well, just a real recap on The Division itself. I thought it was a fantastic game. I loved the whole concept of how they spread the virus using cash transactions during the holiday season. And now we get to see it move into Washington, D.C. At E3, when we played through the demo, which was kind of, I think, at an airport or something, if I remember correctly.
It was the crash site outside the Capitol. Yeah,
that's right. It played really well. I mean, it's very much, it pretty much stays the original formula of the original The Division. Obviously, co-op multiplayer allows you to take your team in. I thought it played really smoothly at E3. The demo and the beta, other than there being a little bit of a, I don't want to say choppy release because I don't think that's fair. I think it actually did pretty well considering where they're at and where they have to go with the beta. But all in all, I think it's really come a long way. I'm excited for the release in March. It's definitely one that's going to be on my top list to get when it comes out. And I'm looking to see how much we add to it based on the original The Division.
And what I also was impressed with is it was not just let's take The Division, same gameplay, same mechanics, and just set it in DC. While the movement, gameplay, menus, and stuff will be familiar, there were some very interesting wrinkles, such as new equipment, such as being able to, if you try to take on a mission solo and you die, you can hit a button to call in backup. So instead of having to be randomly into like it used to be where you had to say, well, I'm just going to put random matchmaking out there and wait for someone to call me into a party and, oh, great, I get to replay this mission I've completed 7 times already. You could specifically respond to backups where you could say, oh, this one's doing this mission, this one's doing that one. You can pick it, you can call them in. There were various areas that you could go in and let off a flare gun to bring in NPC characters. They have their version of the Dark Zone, so it did seem to be taking the best elements of it, making it familiar enough that you could jump in without a new learning curve, but yet fresh enough that it's the same thing, just with new graphics. So, Mark, Jeremy, either of you guys have a comment about this?
I have not played the first game, but it sounds cool. So you're saying it was an open world game, but it's also online?
Yeah, it's basically an open world game where you can run through it yourself and play with NPCs. But if you wish, there are other players in. You can get your buddies in and start a party and go out. You can randomly matchmake and basically say, hey, I'm stuck here. Let me find some other people who are looking for people in the parties. You help them out, they help you. And then sometimes you're just in the middle of a firefight and all of a sudden, or a random event, and you run across other people and, in the course of helping each other out, you can just say, hey, this guy seems to be on the ball. Let's, let me invite him over and let's team up. And you can use your chat programs and everything like that. And there's crafting and looting and random events and weather changes. I know in the first one, it was pretty much always snow covered. And I know in the demo, we actually, day and night cycles, that sort of thing. We got into a firefight on a map I'd actually completed before, and a heavy rainstorm came in. And that was kind of cool because it had thunder and lightning, and visibility was just lousy, especially when the bad guy had a sniper rifle in a high elevation. But, we had some fun with it. So,
You guys have sold
Justin.
me.
Oh yeah, Justin,
I'm
do you
gonna
have a
get
take? Oh yeah, it's a sweet game, and the great thing is they are still supporting the original game. They're still putting all sorts of not just the DLC, but free content, free upgrades, new stuff, and I think they're going to continue to do that up through the release of the new game, and so that is pretty sweet. Justin, do you have a comment on this before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a similar boat. I didn't actually play the first game, but Ubisoft does seem to get better and better at their open world formula over their subsequent releases. So this should be good.
Yeah, and what was great though is you can kind of play it. This was a game that I kind of played in pieces where some missions I was able to take care of on my own, but you kind of got to a point where it was like, okay, I'm rapidly at that point where I can't go alone anymore. And it was a matter of, well, I can just free roam, and sometimes I played, and then you'd let it sit for a while, and then you go back to it. But once you got a good group that you were comfortable with, we cleared that thing through. And I'm not going to say it wasn't challenging. It was. I mean, but we actually got through the end of the story campaign. And the beautiful thing about that is when you do that, the game is still there. You can go replay the missions. All these other side missions pop up. It's like you get the end animations and everything like that, but there's still the game. And then they kept opening new areas, new gameplay modes, new challenges, new equipment. And so, it's something you could keep visiting. Now, Ubisoft has got another release coming. We got Far Cry New Dawn next week, which is, it's essentially the sequel to Far Cry 5 because it does take place in the aftermath of what happened in Far Cry 5. Now, the interesting thing is that there have been 3 DLC releases for Far Cry 5. Let's see, Michael, see if you can help me out with this. One of them was set on Mars. One of them was set in Vietnam, and I'm trying to remember where the third one.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the third one too.
It was like a zombie thing, wasn't it? If I remember correctly, it was.
Yeah,
wasn't that the one on the farms with the zombies and everything like that?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Either way, there were 3 of them. This one is a direct sequel, and the interesting thing about it is it's not coming out at the $59.99 price point. It's coming out at a $39.99 price point. Ooh. And as it was explained to me, it's not, some people said, well, is this just DLC? They've already done the season pass. As it was explained to me, there are rumors that it's as big as Far Cry 5 was.
Really? For that price point?
For that price point. Now, whether or not they're stripping away the multiplayer, are they saying it may have co-op, but we won't have the arcade mode and all of that? Who knows? Because we won't find out until it's released next week. But I mention that because we also have the latest Metro game, and I know, Justin, you're a big fan of the Metro game. And then we have, depending on which version you get, the controversial rollout for Anthem, where if you're in this group, you can get it here. If you're in this group, you get it on this date. And if you're in this group, you get it on this date. But some people will be getting Anthem next week. Now, we've talked in the past about the time when we saw Battlefield 1, Call of Duty, and Titanfall all roll out within a couple of weeks of each other. And I think our consensus was Titanfall 2 kind of didn't get the love that it should have because it was caught in the middle between all these rollouts. Now you have 3 big titles essentially rolling out at the same time. One is third-person perspective, 2 are mainly first-person, but is this going to be a problem putting these 3 things out so close to each other? And I do find the irony that this is coming out around Valentine's Day weekend. If it's the old, what are you looking for the man in your life? Here you go. But, so who wants to open with this one? Good idea, start. Bad idea? Okay.
So I'm going to start. So I'm going to be honest. I think Metro kind of hurt themselves by going to Epic only as the game service.
Yep.
I think if they're getting lots and lots of pushback now for those who didn't pre-order on Steam. I'm going to be honest. I did pre-order it on Epic just because it was $10 cheaper. And the fact that I'm a big fan of the series. I've played through the first 2. But I think that's going to negatively impact their release. How much? It's hard to say. So I think between Anthem and Far Cry New Dawn, Far Cry New Dawn is coming out fairly close to Far Cry 5. Again, there's a question about whether it's a full release package for the price. I think Anthem is still going to take the top marks between the 3. The reason being is I think that one's probably got the most excitement behind it. Now, given the fact that it did have a tumultuous beta release, and the fact that I had issues with my rig, and I have a pretty high-end rig getting even 60 frames per second at ultra widescreen, I'm going to wait on it. I'm going to be honest. So, I don't know how much that negativity and that negative press is going to hurt them, but I still think Anthem's going to take the top slot.
Okay, who's next on this?
Well, I wanted to just, if you don't mind, some clarification. So,
Yep.
I know Anthem has all these, dodgy sort of release dates. Is that to say that Metro has something kind of similar? That there's a tiered system of who gets it when?
So with Metro initially was available for pre-order on Steam. The new Epic Games service came out, and they basically went to the developers for Metro, and they made a deal that Metro would be exclusively released on Epic servers only. So it's been pulled from Steam. If you pre-order it on Steam, you still get it day release. Otherwise, you have to go to Epic to buy it.
Oh wow!
Which has really upset quite a few people.
A lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, for a number of reasons. Epic's new storefront's fairly new. They're limited on forums and that sort of thing. They don't have a lot of games out there already. It's another program that you have to have on your system just to buy a game. And the only option to buy Metro now is either, if you buy it for consoles, you can obviously buy it online in the console stores or in the store. But if you want to buy it for PC, which is how I play it, you have to buy it from Epic now. You can't play it for Steam. There's some talk that they may release it to Steam within another year, but for right now, it's an Epic Game Store exclusive only.
Interesting.
And it was available for pre-order on Steam for months, and then a couple of weeks before release date, they pull it off of Steam and make it an Epic Store exclusive. So.
And this is the kind of thing that kind of ticks off people because, we talk about the streaming services and how more and more of them keep coming. You've got Steam, and now you've got the Epic thing. You've got Origin. You have Discord is getting into distribution because they put out last year The Nightmare was exclusive there. And then, of course, you have, Uplay has their system. Now, many of their games you can get elsewhere, but, you go through, if you buy directly from them, you go there. And then, of course, Bethesda has their launcher, and it's, it's a lot of
it's
software.
Just convoluted at some point. Like I get free games through Twitch Prime every month, and through that I've built a library of a lot of games. I was like, oh my god, I was wanting to buy that one day, but now I have it. That's so cool. But then I also have not actually played them just because I don't really like it. Like, I have trouble getting my controllers to register in a way that I don't on Steam and things like that. So it becomes this like, oh, maybe I still will buy it on Steam one day if it's cheap enough, even though it's sitting right there on Twitch. And so that, I think the whole thing, whether it's that or, and then with Anthem, is it a lot of like, if you pre-ordered it here, if you pre-ordered the special edition, it's just, there's a lot more decisions to make beyond just, oh, I'll get that game. You know what I mean?
It makes sense that Epic wants to have like a game that they sell so that they get people to like use their product or whatever. But it's kind of shitty that they did it after the game was available elsewhere.
Yeah, and not only did they pull it, so it's not like that you can still buy it on Steam. They pulled it without giving Steam any warning, and the fact they knocked the price $10 cheaper if you buy it from Epic.
Yeah.
So again, it was really the process they did it, and I agree. Epic needs because it's a new streaming service or a new storefront. Right. They have to have exclusives to draw people there. I get that. It just probably wasn't the best way to build goodwill for both the Epic servers themselves and also for the Metro brand as a whole.
I think it was already a sort of controversial thing, just in the sense that people were like, I don't want another storefront. I don't, I feel like there was some reluctance to it, just its existence, just based on it, it alone. And then to throw stuff like this seems like, they're not maybe not helping them become true competitors to Steam, right?
I think I read somewhere that the developers like Epic more. They get more money from it or something. Mm-hmm. Is that who that's for, really?
That's usually how it works.
Yeah. Well, they're definitely getting incentivized to make their games to be released only there. Now, whether or not that'll last, if they become a major distributor, I don't know. The other things that Epic doesn't quite have, I believe, is, if I've read this all appropriately, is they don't offer cloud saves, which is kind of a big thing that Steam does offer. So again, it's a new service, so these aren't necessarily things we wouldn't expect as a new service. Again, I think it's just the way they kind of went about it that kind of ticked off a lot of people.
Did you guys hear about that?
Oh, go ahead. I was going to just say, can you imagine if this launch is buggy and like people, can't download that? You know, sometimes when we get those codes, Michael, for review, like you guys get as well, and you take a file that should be, say, 40 gigs, and you go, okay, fine, boom, no problem. And because the servers are lousy or they're lagged down, they tell you, okay, this is going to take you 5 hours to download a 40 gig thing when you're like, this shouldn't take 10 minutes, or maybe 20, maybe 15 minutes, and it's going to take 5 hours. Can you just imagine that nightmare? If this is a buggy download or these things. Anyway, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was going to say, just in a similar, somewhat similar vein of just maybe some of Epic's troubles in its infancy as a storefront. Did you guys hear about that Axiom Verge thing with the Steam file?
No, tell us.
I did hear about that.
So as part of their, I think, to try to harbor some new customers and stuff, I think it's every 2 weeks. The Epic Store has been offering a different free game.
Yep.
I think they launched with Subnautica, then I think it was Super Meat Boy, and maybe I'm missing one or two, but now it's Axiom Verge. And somewhere along the way, I'm kind of paraphrasing this, I might not get the details right, but there was a file that they went through and deleted because it was like Steam something something, and so they thought it was something to do with Steam, but it was really some kind of either sound effect or animation or something involving like little Steam bursts, like in one of the backgrounds or something. So it actually, like, the game wasn't running for people because they took out the Steam thing that actually was like, no, it's just literally having to do with a Steam graphic or something. Again,
it's too bad they didn't just replace it with like an Epic logo, so when you went to like set a pipe,
when you break a pipe, it just says Epic.
Oh, gosh. So, guys, before I forget too, next week we have New York Toy Fair going on, and we will have somebody there, not one of our group. We'll be here reporting on it. Basically, we have some of the people who are based on the East Coast. They're going to go check it out, and I'll be getting pictures and video all weekend now. I think this is our third or fourth year covering it, and we actually had some really interesting things. They're getting a lot of invites to actually come by. Other than come by and have a look, we're reserving a space for you. And she's getting to go to Mattel. She's getting to go to some of the other places. And we're very curious because in years past, you get some Star Wars stuff, you get some video game stuff. But of course, I know last year the Jurassic World, The Lost Kingdom was big. There was a lot of Jurassic World stuff. There's always DC and Marvel stuff all over the place. And then, of course, it's kind of funny because some people go to this thinking, oh, I'm going to get the look at all the new figures that are coming from the new Star Wars film or whatever. And that's not necessarily the case here because some of them are on the floor, some of them are back room, invite only type things. And then, of course, you had, Michael, it's in Vegas, isn't they have the licensing fair, I think, right after CinemaCon as well?
Right, yeah, it's in Vegas. It's right
that's where you get those. But just curious, guys, what do you think is going to be the big thing? I mean, I'm not talking like, the new Hungry Hippos or the new Barbie, but of the pop culture, let's stick with movies, TV, and games. Walking Dead's always been big things. What is that one? Stranger Things. They had a lot of figure stuff like that. What do you think is going to be of all the rage, and what would you most be interested to see?
Oh, Game of Thrones. It's the final
Game
season.
of Thrones. There you go. That's a good.
Those, there's gonna be. I'm sure there'll be some like Ice Dragon or something.
Mm-hmm. Did you? Oh, by the way, before we go on, did you hear about Kit Harington?
I don't think so. What happened with him?
He said in a recent interview he got in trouble because he spoiled the ending to his wife and she wouldn't talk to him for several days. He said.
I mean, I'm sure it'll be like bittersweet. I doubt it's gonna be a happy one.
Yeah. Anyway, go on though. What else is of interest?
I mean, off the top of my head, Avengers seems like gotta be something. This won't be the hot issue, but just my own personal preference. I would love to see what kind of wrestling stuff is coming out. But that's just kind of, I'm sure, neither a top shelf nor much buzzed about item, but just kind of always there sort of thing. I would assume. I'm trying to think of what are the other big. Stranger Things 3 is that July 4th? Is that happening? Yeah, so that seems like it would line up pretty well as a good opportunity to start getting people excited about it.
It's always fun for me because I remember when we first went in, the person who went, he was like, "What do you want me to focus on?" And I said, "Okay, Star Wars, superheroes, video games, obviously look at anything that looks interesting." If, my attitude was, if it's interesting to you, it's going to be interesting to the readers. Take a picture of it, go on from there. But it's also interesting to see what clicks. I mean, there are things like they'll send me over these photo sets during the day, and you're like, oh God, this is going to be huge. And you start loading up the superhero photos, and the public's like, eh. But then, but then it'll be something completely obscure that you had, no interest in, that you actually just put in a random set. Then they're like, what's that little figurine from Square Enix over there? Or what's this character from The Witcher? And you're like, really? With all the merchandise they have on the market, that's the one you're interested in.
Well, I know Hasbro was announcing new Power Rangers stuff, so I guess Power Rangers is still a huge thing to this day. I kind of missed out the boat on that. I was too young for it when it came out. So I mean, too old for it when it came out. So, and I would imagine, Mego had a big release this year where they were releasing older figures in Target and stuff. I'm curious if those did well and if we're going to see more Mego figures at the Toy Fair.
Oh, on a side note, guys, before we go on, we have access to Comic-Con, but as you know, obviously everybody can't get a pass. It's just
of course
kind of the way it is. And my wife and I, we've had ours for a while because we've done coverage. And Michael, a few years ago, started doing stuff for us. He had been trying. What was it, Michael? 10 years?
At least 5. Yeah.
They finally got tickets, and they're there all weekend this year. So we're like looking forward very much. Awesome. So because Michael and I, we've covered CES together, we've done the Phoenix shows, but he goes off and does CinemaCon, and I do other things. It's kind of like since I'm doing Comic-Con, the least I can do is give the guy CinemaCon, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But we're all sitting there going, we can't wait until he and his wife get there this year just to see. He's been to the big cons before, but it's like there are big cons and there's Comic-Con, and I just can't wait till he gets on the floor and he sees that row. And I don't know if you guys have ever been or not. I would think you had, but
I've only been to New York Comic-Con, but I assume you guys are talking about San Diego.
Yeah. That dealer floor that is just like several football fields long and wide of prop after prop after booth after booth after booth. And I remember like our first year going, we went in there, we spent so much time on the floor, and then it's like, wait a second, there's panels all upstairs, and there were people literally thinking Comic-Con was just that and a couple panels upstairs. It's like, no, it's several blocks long. So that is an example, and I mention that simply because they have a lot of vendors there. You have the mom and pop vendors, and then you have the big corporations from, Marvel, Dark Horse, Sideshow Collectibles, all of them there. And they have some just incredibly, we always put up pictures like that. We come in when we get a break in between our interviews and our panel schedules, and we do that. And you see these just incredibly detailed figures. Some of them are about yay high of, this is the alien recreated. This is the Queen. This is the Nostromo. And then over at the DC booth, this has always been a plus for us for the last several years, is that they always put costumes up from one of the upcoming films. So like you'll say, here's the Justice League costumes, here's the Aquaman costumes and stuff like that. And that got me thinking about Toy Fair, because not this year, but the prior year, they had a line of Hot Wheels that were superhero themed.
Oh, that's cool.
And people went nuts for that. I mean, we took a couple photos of the car. I mean, they were like they had this full-size car here. They had these little Mylar cases with the hard plastic over them right there. And just he wasn't able to hold them or get up close, but just shooting them through. People were going bonkers over that. So, yeah, it does make you wonder, what is going to be the thing that pops? And then, you always have that thing too, where you sit there and you look at it, and like you said, you look at the films that are upcoming. If we were to sit here and say, what are the big films coming up? Well, you got Captain Marvel, you got the Avengers, you got Star Wars. Those are pretty much a big thing. And then, of course, there's all these other things coming. Disney's got a ton of films coming out between their Dumbo and some of the other things. There's Frozen 2, which is apparently going to be coming later this year. And we know that when they get to the D23 Expo, they'll be pushing their stuff. And that is the big thing. What is going to be the thing that pops? Is it going to be, is it going to be tied into an existing title, or is it going to be something, we haven't even talked about the possibility of Star Trek Discovery stuff. They're probably going to be doing more and more merchandise. Westworld. We haven't really seen we haven't seen a lot of Westworld merchandise, and it's come out that it's probably going to be 2020 until season 3 drops. Terminator.
I was just going to say Terminator with it because maybe the excitement is not quite there, but it's just a thing that lends itself to cool action figures and stuff like that so much. I feel like.
And see, I would love to know what the process is, because I know some companies have the line and they crank out stuff. And then you have the situation where the movie's coming, we better have products in the store. And then you have that, you remember it used to be kind of a given that if a major movie was coming out, you could bet there's a whole line of toys coming out. Mm-hmm. Not as much anymore. There are some films that you go, where's all the toys for it? Yeah. And they're not really at Target and Walmart. They're at the specialty retailers online. So, here's a good one. Overwatch. Are we going to see a bunch of new Overwatch figures, or is it a case of, well, that's kind of, running its course? Are we going to see Fortnite characters?
I bet that would be big.
Yeah.
If Apex Legends really blows up, I bet you'll see those characters.
Oh yeah, and see, what we always used to joke. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We always used to joke that one of the best ways to check these things is when you get to con season. And for us, I mean, con season's all the time. There's always the con. But when I refer to con season is when you get to the summer, when you're getting to the big boys, when you get to what used to be called Phoenix Comic Con, it's Phoenix Fan Fusion, draws over 100,000 people. Then you get to E3. Not as many cosplayers there, but they do have 15,000 public. But when you get to San Diego Comic-Con, that is always a great buzz. What are people dressing up as? And you remember a couple of years ago, Michael, we were commenting how many Deadpools are there and how many...
Although every year it seems to be mostly Deadpools.
Oh, what was the one of the girls were doing that? Oh, Harley. It was like, how many Deadpools and how many Harleys do we have to have? Whereas last year... Do you remember what it was? It kind of threw me off last year.
In New York, it was, for me, I saw a lot of Rick and Morty.
Yeah. Last year, there didn't seem to be a dominant... they had one guy. He was good, and I'm trying to remember if it was last year or the year before, but they had... And I'm drawing a blank. Was his name Spicer? This guy had a mobile White House podium. And he went around in a suit, and he was going around, and he would it was like a Segway, and he would drive down, and he would stop, and he'd pull up, and he had the little podium, and he'd sit there, and he'd start doing a propaganda speech. And he was very good because he was very clever not to use any hot button topics, but he just came out and I vote for me, and and then he would drive on, and he would, and that was pretty funny. I thought. There's a guy that's got a lot of free time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I would think Fortnite's going to be a huge thing this year. It seems to be all the rage still. I'm kind of surprised at how long it's been the rage, but I would expect that we'll see a lot of Fortnite costumes at Comic-Con this year.
And it's funny because you guys probably don't know. I mentioned it briefly, but I do these panels, and one of the things we do is I do the movies coming in the next 3 years, but for example, this year we'll be looking at 2020 to 2022. Practically everything hasn't even been before the cameras yet. So we're going off release schedules and what the studios have told me. We do stuff on upcoming video games before the thing, and then they've had me add in a TV one recently because with all the new streaming services. Yeah. And, it's really popular, and it's this big deal. And people come to me and say, well, why don't you go and cosplay, and why don't you do this? It's like, okay, number one, when I go to a convention, I'm there in a professional capacity. And I can tell you, when you sit down to interview people, they generally don't appreciate you coming in a costume as much. And secondly, if I'm not at the table, I'm either walking around taking pictures. We have a booth where we do charity fundraising and stuff like that. It's a pretty crazy event, but it is always fascinating to me to see the amount of effort that people put into these costumes. And then by the flip side, then there are always those people. I have a photo somewhere on Facebook of this poor guy at Comic-Con, and I still to this day always laugh at him. He was kind of dubbed Ghetto Batman. And the poor guy, we think he got his ticket, and it was he was so happy. And my guess is he was probably some guy who tried forever to get tickets. He finally got tickets. And I'm guessing New York does the same thing. You kind of have people that hang around in the halls and outside and take photos before they open the doors to the thing. So he's out there, and we're all standing there waiting for them to open it up and let us in. And this poor guy, imagine a black ski cap with two cardboard ears of irregular length taped to the top. He had a pair of gray sweatpants with black tennis shoes and a pair of baggy 70s style athletic pants on over that, a black shirt with like a cardboard it was like this cardboard Batman logo. And the guy came in and he was all like, yeah. And then all of a sudden, all these people who you can tell have been working on these costumes for months, like the professional, and you could see the poor guy like, oh man, and you know what was so great about it? Everybody started lining up, wanted to take photos with him. And it wasn't a teasing thing. It was basically, this is the guy who gets it. He's not here for some commercial purpose of, oh, I got to improve my website and get donations, or I'm trying to make a name for myself, or I'm trying to win the costume contest. He is literally the whole nature. I'm a fan. I got tickets. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah.
This is the best I could do, and I'm happy about that. And I thought, good for him.
Mm-hmm.
And
good for you, Ghetto Batman.
Exactly.
They should do a comic run about him. Get him in there.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I'd love to see that. The growing backlash against billionaires. It's time we launch a Batman that is not a trust fund kid. Right now.
Cardboard Batman.
A cardboard Batman. I think the world's ready
Legitimize
for it.
the costume.
My utility belt is just a belt I take off and hit people.
And it's so fun because, as you guys seen, some of these people there was a documentary, Morgan Spurlock, who did Super Size Me and does a lot. He did this documentary about Comic-Con years ago, and it was fascinating. One of them was about this nerdy couple, and he had an extremely clingy and obsessive girlfriend who didn't want him out of his sight. Well, he was trying to propose to her, and he was trying to get her out of the way so he could finalize it. And basically, it was all set up during Kevin Smith's Hall H panel. He had it all arranged that he was going to get to ask a question of Kevin, and the two of them were in on it to propose to her. And that was funny. There was a guy who was an Air Force staff sergeant who wanted to go become a comic writer. And so he was going to the portfolio reviews. And there was like a couple of wannabe superheroes and that sort of thing. And then there was this girl, I think she was from Iowa or somewhere. And her whole thing was she was trying to break into Hollywood in the costume industry. So she and her buddies put together a Mass Effect 2 costume lineup, and their whole thing was to go and win the costume contest that they do. And it turned out she did, actually. She blew them all away and ended up, I think, they hired her to work on like costumes for the upcoming games and stuff like that. But it was fascinating to see the stories. And, their whole thing is there are thousands upon thousands of these kind of stories going on at the convention every single year. So,
yeah.
Very cool. So, guys, I'd be curious. What since we're on the topic of conventions, what are some of your favorite convention stories?
I was going to tell this one just because it kind of ties into your Batman story. Reminded me of this. My favorite thing I've seen at one. I grew up originally in Michigan, so they have it's not as big as some of the others, but like most conventions, I think it's certainly grown in the last decade or so. But there's the Motor City Comic Convention held in Novi every year. This must have been somewhere between 6, 7, 8 years ago or something. And I was there with a friend, and there was a wing of the thing was doing a wrestling show. Shout out to XICW, keeping it holding it down in Detroit. Big wrestling guy here, obviously. Sorry, I keep finding an excuse to bring it up. But we're sitting there, we're watching the match, watching the wrestling. It's really cool because like I love all kinds of wrestling, but indie wrestling is cool because it's like it's very intimate. They're not playing to the cameras. They're yelling at the crowd because that's there's 20, 30 people watching it. So when the heels, the bad guys, they it's just a very exciting time because like they talk crap about the audience and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And just what like there's this, like you were saying, just impressively vast array of characters and stuff. And so, textbook wrestling was happening. Bad guys beating up the good guy. There's little kids who probably haven't seen a lot of wrestling, and they're just like, no, don't do it, no, and he just keep beating him. And he's got the guy in the position kind of like that before you do a pile driver when the guy's just kind of bent down and his head is like between your legs, you know what I mean? So right before he picked him up to do the pile driver or power bomb or anything, he just pointed out to the crowd and said, "This one's for you, fat Superman." And then everyone kind of looks at like there is just the saddest, fattest Superman I've ever seen. And it's like, again, like just like you were saying with Batman, I don't mean to pick on the guy, but just in the context of this bad guy saying the most evil thing you could, it's just like, oh man, you nailed it. Like everyone in this room hates you so much right now.
That's so
Said
good.
this one's for you, fat Superman, and then did the move to the guy. So that's probably still the funniest thing I've ever seen at one.
It's funny because I actually had kicked around last year the idea of doing a book. We had some people, sign off on it. We were going to do some of the, convention favorite stories from covering conventions over the years, as well as that. And, it was funny because I kind of put it on the back burner thinking I needed a little more because I felt just a few anecdotal recaps. But, my wife was like, "What about the time you almost plowed over Summer Glau in the hotel parking lot?" And I go, "Oh yeah, I was running to an interview and she was running to a panel, and we got within a couple of feet of each other. And it was like, oh, excuse me," and stepped aside and she looked up, very big smile, really nice lady, no problem, walked on. And my wife's like, "You know who that was?" And I said, "Summer Glau." And she goes, "She looked at you, smiled like that, and you have absolutely no game at all." I'm like, "Honey, I'm married now. Like that game is retired long ago." But I think, it's funny because you can go back. I remember doing the Star Wars celebration a couple of years ago at Anaheim, because I know they got the big one in March coming up. And we had the Clone Wars panel, and then we had the Rebels interview. So they had them all lined up, and it was fascinating because I learned, like, for example, what they did was every Friday they got them all in a Winnebago. And they drove them up from L.A. to the San Francisco area. They recorded their dialogue, and then they drove them back. And that was their week. They recorded all their dialogue once a week. And the idea was, in that time that they're in the Winnebago, driving up and driving back, is when they do the bonding and all of that. And I'll never forget, they're all lined up on the podium, and you've got the media everywhere and all the cameras going. And someone says, "It's really interesting that all of your characters are named after Bible moments in the Bible, and how do you feel about that?" And there was like this silence, and then Stephen Bloom comes out and goes, "I don't remember the Book of Chopper anywhere." And there's like this stunned silence. And then finally, people let out, and I'm like, wow, that's there are questions, and then there are questions. Yeah. Anyway, what any other ones before we get on to the final topic of the day?
I'm trying to think of one. This isn't really a story so much as like we went one year, and maybe it's kind of a darker story, but like we all went out to like this bar afterwards, and our other editor Mike was there, and he ended up, like, as the night got on, we all got like drunker and drunker, and it stopped being like a Comic-Con party and started more being just like a regular like bar hangout. And he got into this really bad argument with his girlfriend, but it was so funny because the whole time he was like the only one there still dressed in his like very accurate Wario costume. And it was just so funny watching Wario fight with his drunk girlfriend. Just like
this was
he looks so
New
much
York?
like him. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, especially with New York, where like I don't know how it is in San Diego, but in New York, the Comic-Con is very much just the Javits Center. And New York's a big city, so as soon as you leave the Javits Center, you're just a guy dressed as Wario in New York City. And it's just
people are going home going, "Yeah, New York City's crazy. I saw a guy dressed like Wario fighting with his girlfriend."
Yeah.
Like they don't know the context of the comic
not at all.
convention.
You really, it's very easy to.
San Diego is trying to get an expansion to expand it, and that's been caught up in some politics and stuff. But it's massive. I guess the best way I can describe it is you've got the convention center, which is spread out like several blocks long this way.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got 1, 2, 3 hotels on next to it, and they have things like prize rooms. There's some overflow rooms, some stuff like that. Not really panels, but like Nintendo will be there. Next to it, you have this open air garden, and they do a lot of free stuff there. If you can't get a ticket, you can go to that. Behind it is the marina, and they have a lot of party boats, like TV Guide will have one with all these celebrities on it. Next to that is the Hilton, and they have like the 3rd biggest panel room in there. And then upstairs is where the press goes. There's this huge floor, which is all conference rooms for the interviews and the roundtables. Across the street is Petco Park, where the Padres play, and they have like a free pop-up area there. And then all the way down the other side of the street, there's all these things. Like last year, we had Jack Ryan, that Netflix series. They had like a full market, helicopter, all that. We've seen things like, and sometimes they spread out a couple blocks that way. So yeah, it spans outside of the convention center a couple of city blocks. And then, of course, you'll get these things later on at night downtown in the gas lamp. The Hard Rock Hotel has a lot of stuff in there, too. I mean, there's, at any time, as you know, there's hundreds of things going on. If you're not in panels, there's invite-only things. So there's other things. There's pop-up things popping up and down the street. So it's a massive thing. And like I tell people, I said, it's not an exaggeration. We could go in there with 20, 30 people and still not even come close to covering everything, because there's always, at any given time, there's at least 30, 40, 50 things going on. And then you get these random things that they don't even, like I remember a group of kids were sitting there taking photos, and all of a sudden Robert Downey Jr. walks up right behind him, photobombs him. And, there was the story about, what's his name? Daniel Radcliffe put on a Spider-Man costume and was walking around on the floor. And then, and I'm drawing a blank. Bryan Cranston got a mask of his character from Breaking Bad, put it on, and was walking around the floor right after his panels. So lots of crazy stuff there. Yeah. So guys, wanted to close out, and I was debating whether or not we should talk about this topic, but I think even though it's a negative topic, I think it's one that definitely should be discussed. But we've heard word that Activision Blizzard is going to have hundreds of layoffs this week. And this, of course, does not sit well with some people, because they were talking about the compensation the new CFO got to come over, which was quite huge. And then immediately, talk of the layoffs are going to be coming. We've covered the backlash from BlizzCon and how people were expecting something more than a mobile game to be announced. That didn't come. Black Ops 4 is selling, but I do believe it's not quite hitting the number that they had expected, even though I believe it is the top selling franchise, again, on console. But, let's look at the bigger picture. Destiny walked away from them. They've got Shadows Die Twice. They'll have a new Call of Duty game next year. And, of course, they have the port of Crash Bandicoot Racing. So let's go around. Why do you think this is happening, and what do you think is going to be the fallout from it?
It feels like, I'm not going to pretend to be more of an expert on the particulars than I am, but I just think by and large we're just moving to something. Seems like I would think something has to change, right? When you have Red Dead Redemption having the highest opening weekend of anything ever, it feels like a job in the games industry ought to, for a big company, ought to be more secure than one day finding out your job with Activision Blizzard is not secure. You know what I mean? That's just my kind of again, not knowing the particular sort of thoughts. It's definitely sad to hear about. And then also just like in the wake of, Telltale wasn't all too long ago either. It was just like these things that to just like from just a consumer level, you go, wait, but these guys are like doing okay, right? It's not, it seems like not a company that's coming off bomb after bomb after bomb or something.
Exactly.
So it just seems to not quite add up in some way. And I don't know what the future holds, but just for what the gaming industry is, like what it does on just an economic level, it just seems like it's just a travesty. I'm sorry this is not more eloquent or insightful, but yeah, it's just a bummer. And I hope there's a change. I hope there's a sea change, and then we can stop hearing stories like this,
Yeah, I wonder if it has to do with, I worked in the gaming industry, and I saw two different companies. I saw a thing, and this is before I started covering them, so obviously I, get a lot of other stuff, but I saw game after game shoved out the door by executives who were not gamers, who I remember one who literally had to ask one of the developers to tell him about the game. And I'm thinking it's shipping in a week and you don't even know about it. And he kept referring to it as units. How many units of this product? And I'm like, you're a bean counter. Your job is to basically keep the board happy, to keep the stock number up. And, you would hear these stories about, well, we don't care if it's garbage or not. If we ship so many titles within a quarter, that makes us look good to the investors. The stock goes up. And it's like, right, but what happens when the games are garbage and you lose your consumers? Well, it doesn't really matter, because the people behind it are all promoted up the chain, so someone else feels the fallout. And it's like, with these budgets getting what they are, some of them, a lot of companies will not talk about what the gaming budget is, but they're on par with some of these major Hollywood movies. And so when it bombs, or even worse, if it does well but not well enough, heads do roll.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, and I know there's been a lot of backlash about how much they've given the CFO. Unfortunately, that's a sign of the times when we go corporate, right? Now we're talking about, yes, the corporate guys getting paid bonuses that are outrageous when the other people are feeling the pinch? Absolutely. Unfortunately, that's what happens when we get to a level where we're dealing with the stock market. We're dealing with public companies that are now trading publicly. In order to attract that type of individual to be running the executive line, that's unfortunately what they end up doing. And yeah, unfortunately, those who are making the product, those who are doing the actual grunt work, are the ones that feel the pressure and don't get that money. Is that fair? Absolutely not. Do I agree with that? I don't. But unfortunately, when you're talking big corporations, you're talking CEO and CFO levels, that's what it takes to attract that sort of person into that field. Is that going to mean that in the future Activision, EA is going to do better because of that? Well, it's hard to say, but unfortunately, it does affect those who are actually doing the work at the lower levels.
And Justin, let's get your take on this.
Yeah, so I've been reading a little bit about this, and I guess one thing that, I mean, this is absolutely not fortunate at all, but, you know, a little bit of detail on this is apparently, according to a rumor by, Kotaku, most of these layoffs are primarily in non-game development departments such as publishing, marketing, and sales. So any active products or projects that are, going on right now will probably continue if that rumor is true. That being said, a lot of this you have to kind of take into perspective. So, Call of Duty did well, but supposedly not quite as well as they were hoping. This kind of goes under your category as successful, but not quite as successful as maybe they had projected. The other thing also to look at is Overwatch was a successful title, but in the grand picture of Blizzard's, history, Overwatch was really a salvage title because Overwatch started out as Titan, which was supposed to be the carrier of like the MMO legacy, try to be up the follow-up to World of Warcraft. Apparently that project fell apart and whatever work they had done on it became Overwatch. So as successful as Overwatch is, it's not what they were hoping for. They were hoping for a follow-up to World of Warcraft, and they didn't get that. This is on the heels of them selling off the IP for Destiny and also losing Bungie. And also the huge negative backlash for Diablo. So, I mean, it's going to be a tough few years for Activision, and I really feel for all the people who have lost their positions. But, Activision really has to make some smart decisions and release games that people are, excited about playing.
I think they're going to probably have to do something. We got E3 coming up in June. I think we're probably getting to the point where we're going to see probably March, April. A lot of rumors that Modern Warfare 4 is going to be the next Call of Duty game. But I think we're getting to the point where we're going to start seeing some announcements because there are some companies. I mean, we were talking the other day about what happens if some of these high profile things bomb out the gate. And the numbers say that someone might. There's going to be a backlash. And when you lost Destiny, you got Call of Duty, you got Crash Bandicoot, you got Shadows Die Twice, but, I think the pressure is on to find and develop the next new franchise, and that's going to be the big question. And I think a lot of companies are doing that because, we talked about EA. Sure, they've got FIFA, sure, they've got Madden, but there's a lot riding on Anthem. I mean, heaven forbid Anthem has a less than stellar launch. What are they looking at? The next Star Wars game coming out at the end of the year, outside of FIFA and Madden, and that's going. And heaven forbid that Star Wars game has any problems because that's under scrutiny over some of the stuff. And then it's such a fascinating thing. But then it can all change on a dime because all it takes is one smash release, and all of a sudden, you have one bad bomb, people will forget the three good ones before that. Yeah. But you have one good game, you can survive three bad bombs after it, in many cases, depending on the game.
Yeah, if it's a new Call of Duty, and then it can be the gift that keeps on giving, or I was going to bring that up. It's interesting. What do you guys think about when something like Anthem has this feeling of like, hey guys, did you hear? Here's the new IP. Sometimes I think that can be a tricky thing. Whereas you compare it to something like, I don't know, like Fortnite, like no one saw that and was like, oh yeah, we'll still be talking about this in a year or two. You know what I mean? I think it can be a tough thing to try to, whatever you want to call it, bottle that lightning and say like, oh yeah, this is the new one that everyone's gonna like. That can be seems like putting your eggs in one basket. That can be a tricky proposal sometimes.
It's funny. They admitted that Battlefield 5 sold about 1 million less, I believe, was their announcement, is that it's hit 1 million less. I don't know if you saw the patch that's coming out next week. I think on the 12th it arrives. And I looked at it and I said, now this is a very interesting move on their standpoint. They still have to add the Battle Royale in down the road. And one of their executives recently said, well, that was our mistake, was that we focused on putting a campaign in the game and launching with the campaign instead of launching with the Battle Royale mode. There's apparently like a 4-person co-op squad thing coming in via the patch. But what really caught my attention was there's all sorts of enhancements for ray tracing technology, and that's for the folks who own the 2060, 2070, and 2080 series graphic cards from NVIDIA. They do ray tracing, which is a much sharper and faster way of drawing in the animations, a lot of the details. And essentially Battlefield 5 is kind of the one that's been put on the pedestal as this is your major market PC release that currently supports this new technology. Now, NVIDIA had said the cards hadn't gone over as well as they had hoped with consumers. And of course, some of the backlash was, well, it's got a high price point and there wasn't a lot of product on the market yet that could take advantage of these new features. That game could, and I find it odd that now all of a sudden we're getting a patch already saying, here we go, and it's going to make what you have even better. And I am curious, my thought was, you remember when 3D cards came out, you had a lot of older games go back in and come up with a patch going, now supports 3D technology. And of course, it wasn't 3D, it was a little more than adding some better lighting effects in if you had a 3D card, but they went back. I've been trying to figure out, are we just going to see older games say, and let's worry about the future? Or are older games going to say, let's start putting in some patches to, if we still have an active fan base, let's patch this thing up. Very curious thing.
Well, yeah, maybe it is something like Battlefield, like you said, that came out and underwhelmed. Maybe that's a way to kind of get a bounce back.
But
maybe
are people going to buy the game because of that though, or is that just for people who already have it? Like, I don't know that that's going to draw people in. They were bundling it with these cards that if you bought one of the cards, you got a copy of Battlefield 5 because, and it is pretty cool. But I'll be honest with you, I did get one of the cards to try out, and in game it ran, like any new technology, you would go, ooh, my frame rate's really, and why is it down in the 20s? What's going on here? But boy, it looks really good. And why is the cutscene looking terrible? And why is it, stuttering when on a 1060 card it was running smooth as glass? And then you find out, well, it defaults to the graphics settings, but the ray tracing is still being tweaked. So it'll be interesting. I have a feeling this week ahead is going to be one of these really odd ones. It's either going to be a week where companies stay out of the woods and say, okay, let's wait and get all these launches out and see what happens. Or you're going to see a lot of people throwing news out like crazy, especially since you have so much of the country snowed in. I mean, the poor folks up in Seattle. I don't know if you heard about this mess. They had a Creation Entertainment had a Supernatural convention booked up in Seattle this weekend. And they got 4 to 8 inches of snow. And I know there are people saying, well, 4 to 8 inches of snow, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is you've got a lot of hills like this throughout Seattle, and it's not flat terrain. It's very like this, like this, like this. And usually under the snow, you got about that much ice. And so, 2 inches of snow there, I believe me, I've been on the East Coast in snowstorms. 2 inches of snow in Seattle is far more treacherous than heavier snowfalls in New York because flatter surfaces, they clear off the roadways better. Well, these people couldn't get to the convention. And so the show was like, well, we're canceling today, and then we're going to see what we can do tomorrow. And then all of a sudden, I think 3 of the guests showed up.
and they were coming down from Vancouver where they were filming. So all of a sudden they're on social media going, forget the last comment. So-and-so showed up, so-and-so showed up, and so-and-so showed up. Here's our modified schedule for the day. And then you heard, and they were sitting there saying, and then other cast members started coming on, guys, we want to be there, but we can't get out of Vancouver. We're 3 hours away. And so they just, boom, done. So this is definitely a time when people are going to want to be trying their games.
Yeah, maybe it's a good time to have 3 high-profile games to choose from.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, guys, I think we covered a lot of stuff. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we wrap it up today?
I'll just plug our podcast one last time,
Please.
if you'd let us. The Super Mario Bros. Super Show. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the good stuff. You can find us at Show Pod at Twitter, at Show Pod.
Yeah.
And if people want to read the Hard Times and Hard Drive, we would love that.
Well, perfect. And we'll definitely have you guys on again soon. Until next week, everyone, take care, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks a lot, guys.